We've all seen the GoPro video on YouTube.
So you're going down there. 3, 2, 1, go. Whoa.
Flashing scenes and grooving music on the GoPro YouTube channel, making everything look easy. Just push a button, start recording, voila! Instant Steven Spielberg. Admittedly, it's spectacular. But come on guys, as spectacular as it looks, this is marketing. That's all it is. This isn't reality.
I see a lot of the good picture, good camera thing going on. I mentioned it earlier, somebody will post a good picture in a forum, and then people will be like, oh, what camera and lens did you use? I'm going to get that same gear. Therefore, I'll be able to take pictures that are just as good. But that's stealing all the credit from the photographer. It's the photographer who makes the picture. It's the camera that helps out. Now, if you're a good photographer, you'll want to have good gear so that you can get the best results possible when you go through all that trouble for the mood and the expression and the storytelling and the lighting and the subject matter. You want to make sure your camera doesn't fail you and you do the best you can with it. But a good camera doesn't take good pictures, a good photographer does. Therefore, the next time you see sample pictures for that latest, greatest new camera and they look awesome, just remember, that means they hired a great photographer. It doesn't tell you anything really about the camera.
Of course, there's no way to know if these spectacular scenes in the GoPro YouTube channel are even recorded on a GoPro you yourself get out of a box you buy from a local store. A camera mass-produced from a manufacturer in China, as the GoPro YouTube channel is all about marketing, getting you to buy whatever they're hustling for maximum profit. On the GoPro YouTube channel, in the description, they say all the video come from GoPro cameras, which is most likely true. However, are these specific cameras they're using mass-produced from a manufacturer in China? I rather doubt it. It's obvious. Most of these videos on the GoPro YouTube channel are edited professionally using fancy, smancy, and very expensive computers and editing programs, as well as editors with visual arts degrees and years of experience. When you look at the description of the video on the GoPro YouTube channel, there's nothing to say what camera or cameras were used, even the settings. If you do a search for anything from GoPro about the settings, you only get descriptions of all the settings, not how to combine them actually to reproduce the spectacular video you're watching. About 1% of the video on the GoPro YouTube channel are shot in darkness, and 0% are shot indoors under artificial light. 99% of the video on the GoPro YouTube channel are shot in sunlight, as sunlight makes the footage look spectacular. Aside from the GoPro YouTube channel, there are many other YouTube video and online advice websites telling you how to set up your GoPro camera. And after a few minutes of searching, you see that 99% of them all have to do with outdoor settings.
And it's just like easy to use.
Where in the GoPro YouTube channel and other YouTube channels and online advice websites are all the videos shot indoors under artificial light?
GoPro setup to get some B-roll, to talk to camera once in a while, and it's much easier to grab and go rather than just my GH5 with the bigger microphone, the bigger setup. Like sometimes you just want a small camera.
To answer this, let's begin by looking back at some of the GoPro YouTube video I just showed you. Clearly, the performers are outside under very strong light. The black background is too black to be anything but the night sky. Clearly, the background is a composite of a number of video, very heavily edited to look perfect technically and visually. After a bit of searching, I was able to find a video on the GoPro YouTube channel that was shot under artificial light.
我小时候当被小就是当一个美丽的舞者，但是大家都告诉我，一个听不见的女孩不可能。
一、二、一二三，一二三。
The ISO settings are very high, as well as the camera being stationary. These mean that the quality of the video can be enhanced in post-production, because in reality, there should be a great deal of video noise. Those with a very good eye can see what the visual artist has done to improve the quality of the video before it went to post-production. Most importantly, the performers are wearing black and white, meaning that the visual artist only has to concentrate on getting the blacks and whites correct through a process called white balancing. If the visual artist had to correct for other colors at an ISO this high, there would be a catastrophic amount of noise, rendering the video unusable. In post-production, the visual artist has done a number of steps after correcting the white balance, most importantly using noise reduction software. This is noted by how soft the image looks overall. However, despite their skill, you can still see evidence of noise in the red color in the curtains. The skill, technical knowledge, and computer power to get this video to look this spectacular indoors under artificial light is beyond the reach of most GoPro users. And conclusively, That's why we don't see much of anything indoors under artificial light on the GoPro YouTube channel. If you can't simply push a button to get instant spectacular video indoors under artificial light, you won't be buying a GoPro camera.
For sponsoring this episode.
Here's how a YouTuber who works with GoPro and DJI Osmo cameras professionally sums up the prevailing attitude.
Let's try out some low light settings. So I'll just say it, neither of these cameras have good low light. Treat them like little babies. As soon as the sun goes down, put them to bed. They do look a little bit different in the dark though. The GoPro, I think, just starts to look really mushy and all the detail gets kind of lost. The Osmo looks digitally sharpened, but along with that comes a lot of digital noise. So sometimes one looks better than the other, but yeah.
If this guy knew how to extract good video indoors under artificial light, he might have a different opinion.
Something people don't really talk about is the amount of noise that happens at a camera's base ISO, like ISO 100 on most cameras. Now, many people will say, my camera has no noise at ISO 100, and if you feel that way, that's great. But I've never felt that way, not on any of the cameras I've used. Take a picture of a nice blue sky, and if you zoom in, you'll see visible noise. If you were to crank up the noise reduction, that would look better. If you're not picky about it, that's fine. But some of us, especially those of us who do commercial work, need to have images that are perfectly noise-free. That means we go in and have to manually retouch areas with noise, even at the camera's base ISO. So for us, finding cameras with a good optimal image quality, the amount of noise at that camera's base ISO in good lighting conditions is really important. It can save us a lot of time in the retouching process. So I created a whole video around how to determine what your camera's optimal image quality can be. Check it out at sdp.io/optimal. I'll say this is something I also learned the hard way when we switched to Micro Four Thirds and we started using cameras with both a 2x crop factor and a base ISO of 200. Even at the base ISO, I was getting images that were quite noisy and had similar amounts of noise to ISO 800 on my full frame camera. And that's not something anybody really taught previously.
Studio photographers and commercial photographers like myself, we have to produce perfect images, and no picture comes out of the camera perfect, even at the base ISOs. So before a commercial client will usually accept one of my images, even shot at, say, ISO 100 on a 5D Mark III, I have to go in and manually remove noise from shadow areas, and that's a time-consuming and expensive process. So if I can find a camera that has a better optimal image quality, then that can save me time and money. Finally, if you're a night photographer and you're working on a tripod, even at night you're going to be shooting at the base ISO usually, and you'll want the best possible image quality for making large prints. You probably don't care about optimal image quality if you're shooting moving subjects like sports or wildlife, because you'll have to use a higher ISO than the base ISO anyway. And if you're shooting in low light, taking pictures of your friends at a restaurant and you're not using flash, then you'll have to use a higher ISO too. So none of this measurements I'm talking about matter at all if you're shooting at anything other than the base ISO. In those cases, you could probably just go to DxOMark and look at their ISO score for a camera and get a pretty good sense for how it's going to perform. The main factors in optimal image quality are the maximum light gathered by the camera, the maximum light the sensor could possibly gather. And there are two factors within that. The sensor size, bigger sensors gather more light at a given ISO because it's like a bigger bucket catching more rain. And the base ISO, lower base ISOs like ISO 100 gathers twice as much light as ISO 200. So the lower the base ISO of the camera, the better. We're talking about a real ISO. Most cameras allow an extended ISO. They'll have a real ISO of 100 and then an extended ISO of 50. But 50 is really just ISO 100 like adjusted down in software. So it doesn't really count. You want the base ISO that the sensor is designed for. Talking just about the image quality, we'll see that both the Sonys have about 30% less, 30% more noise in them than the D810 does in optimal conditions. And the reason is the base ISO there. You can see the D810 reports a base ISO of 64, while these two report a base ISO of 100. But the measured ISO of the D810 by DxOMark is 47. So it says it's working with ISO 64. It's really working more like with ISO 50. Why do manufacturers do this? Well, there is a little wiggle room in the ISO standards, so it's not that precise, and they could probably get away with it and still comply with the standards. But consistently, every single manufacturer underrates their own ISO in the same direction. They all basically call it a higher number than it really is, and I think it's because we tend to compare ISO 100 with ISO 100, ISO 800 with ISO 800. So if you're actually shooting at ISO, let's say 640, and you're calling it ISO 800, well, at ISO 640, you're going to be gathering much more light, and thus you're going to be able to produce cleaner images. So manufacturers are kind of gaming the system to make their images at a given ISO look better than other manufacturers, and they've all gotten into the cycle where they're all doing it. They're all lying about the ISOs a little bit. It doesn't really impact anything photographically, but it is something to kind of be aware of. Fortunately, DxOMark and their amazing measurement system takes this into account and factors it out completely so it doesn't change anything. Here's a sample image taken on the D810 at its base ISO against the A7S, the other low light winner, at its own base ISO of ISO 100. They're both full frame cameras, so the D810 is actually going to be gathering more light. And as you can see, if you look in the shadow details here, this should be nice smooth texture as it is over here, but we see definite chunks of color and general graininess, and that's just a sign of not getting quite as much light. Both for a commercial client would still require a little bit of cleaning up, but the D810 would be a little bit easier.
Next we have our 4500 degree range, and this is going to be your fluorescent lights. So if you're in an office space or a hospital, usually these are the lights that also have very bad cast to them, where you're going to need that color correction or that color cast like we looked at for the white balance. So this light right here is the light that I am currently white balanced to. So my camera is set at 4500 degrees Kelvin, and that's why this light right here is being reproduced as white. Anything above that, so any of the numbers higher in Kelvin, so going from 45 up to 8000, are going to be cooler looking colors. Obviously, the farther away you go from your white balance, the more blue or cool those lights are going to look. Same thing in the opposite direction. So if we go down from 4500 degrees Kelvin, everything is going to be warmer and getting warmer the farther you go away. So in this next part that I'm going to show you, I'm not going to change any of the color temperatures of the lights. I'm only going to be changing the camera color temperature, just so you can see how this affects the look and color of each of the lights. Here's all of those same lights. I haven't changed the color temperatures at all, but now I am white balanced at 2000 degrees Kelvin. So this light is being reproduced as white, and anything above that is increasingly cooler or more blue, and anything below that is going to be warmer. If we go over to the next one, so we're going up, and now we are going to be white balanced at 2800 degrees Kelvin. You can see that the one light below it is a little bit warmer. And then all of these lights above that 2800 degree Kelvin are going to be cooler. We'll just jump through the rest of these really quick so you can see how it affects as you go up. So now we're white balanced at 3400 degrees Kelvin. Now we're changing our camera setting and we're white balanced at 4500 degree Kelvin. This is what it looked like at the beginning. Now we'll go up to 5600. Now we're going to go up to 6500. Again, some warmer lights, just barely having some blue in that 8000 degrees. And then we're white balanced at 8000 degrees Kelvin. Now everything below that is going to be warmer and everything above that is going to be cooler. Obviously we don't have any lights that go above 8000, so we only have warm lights in the scene.
Well, hello and welcome to my channel. So you've decided, you've gone ahead and bought the GoPro 7. And the reason you've done that really is because it's got that gimbal smooth quality. That's what it says on the box. And then you go and hit the trails, or you go and skateboard, whatever action sports that you do, and then you discover that that footage is actually quite crap. And then you discover the reason that it's crap is because the algorithm in the GoPro software on the camera just can't cope with low light situations. But it doesn't say that on the box. What it says is hyper smooth, gimbal quality footage, or words to that effect. It doesn't say gimbal smooth quality, crap in low light. So what I decided to do while I was at work is, in a bit of spare time, using my own phone, rang up GoPro customer services and asked some questions. Now the guy I was speaking to, whether it's his fault or not, I found him to be as much use as tits on fish. Now I asked a couple of questions, to which I was put on hold for about an overall of the conversation 20 minutes, and he came back and his information was absolutely useless. So in other words, he was saying, you know, just turn the hyper smooth off, do this, do that. But the whole point is the footage wasn't great as it was in the low light situation. So if I was to turn the hyper smooth off, how would that look? Well, surely that's going to look crap as well. And yes, it did. So then I did what any normal person does. You go on all the forums, then you start watching other people's videos and seeing what they're doing, looking at their settings, and you get people that state that they found the absolute best settings for low light. And I tried them in the situations, bearing in mind I'm still losing lots of good video because I'm trying to work out what's the best, and found that that still didn't work either.
Let's move on to number 3, the reciprocal rule. The reciprocal rule says that you can eliminate camera shake by setting your shutter speed to the reciprocal of your focal length. The reciprocal is, it's like taking a fraction, you put 1 over something. That's how you take the reciprocal. So if you're shooting with a 200mm lens, in theory, you should shoot with a shutter speed of 1/200th or faster to eliminate camera shake. First, this rule ends up getting much more complex than that. This is a rule back from the film days when most people shot full frame 35mm. The way it works is more like shades of gray. You might, at some point, you might get 100% sharp. If you're at 1/8000th of a second, you'll probably get 100%. But if you're at the reciprocal rule, maybe you'll get 80% sharp. And if you're one stop below the reciprocal rule, that might drop to 50% sharp or 25% sharp. It's a matter of percentages. And this is really important to understand, because when you know its percentages, then you know that you can cheat the reciprocal rule by taking lots of pictures and deleting all the ones that are blurry. So people are often amazed because I'll take wildlife pictures at 500mm and then crop to an equivalent of maybe 800 or 900mm. And I'll do that with really slow shutter speeds, like 1/60th of a second, sometimes down to 1/25th of a second. And it's not that I have superhuman hand-holding abilities, it's that when I want to get that shot, I might take 10 pictures or 20 pictures or 100 pictures. Because while the percentage that I get will decrease as I get to slower shutter speeds, I'll always get some percentage. So even at 1/25th of a second, I might need to take 50 pictures, but with 50 pictures, I will get 1 or 2 sharp. So when you want to cheat the reciprocal rule, use good hand-holding abilities, but then take lots of pictures and sort through them and pick the sharpest one. I also recommend starting with a fast shutter speed, getting a few safety shots, and then gradually decreasing that shutter speed. The slower shutter speeds will let your camera use a lower ISO, giving you cleaner images. So that's the benefit of using the slower shutter speed.
Clearly, the current GoPro cameras, and all action cameras for that matter, are not the proper technical solution to record indoor sports under artificial or fluorescent light. However, they are the only action cameras available. If you want to record your action indoors from a first-person point of view, there really isn't a choice. With an action camera on your helmet, moving constantly within an indoor environment of variable lighting, fluorescent and other light bulbs all mixed together, with well-lit and darkened areas, if we can't do anything about the technically inferior camera, what can we do to get great action video? First, you have to come to the realization that the camera itself is the weakest link in the whole process of creating good quality video indoors under artificial light. If you're running around constantly looking for those killer GoPro settings that you think someone else is using, you're going to end up disappointing yourself and giving up only after a few attempts. Second, to get the maximum light into the camera, you're going to have to use a shutter speed of 25 frames per second in combination of 4K, super wide FOV, high ISO and EV comp, white balance on auto to allow the inefficient sensor to gather as much light as possible and still allow you to correct the fluorescent light problem in post-production. Third, you need an inner knack for making great video visually by having an acquired or natural idea of what you want to show and matching it to your current technical ability. As your technical ability improves, so too will your video quality. Fourth, in order to create a professional look in your video, you'll need a professional editing computer and software. A €200 computer and free downloaded software will be your biggest downfall, as you must remember that it's the camera itself that is the weakest link in this whole process, not the computer and software.
First flank captured by the attackers. The upstairs, the corridor, and the shoe store are open to both teams.
Fifth, you need the time to do the editing properly. Sixth, and trust me on this one, don't create your video for likes and views on a YouTube channel, because despite how much work you put into your efforts to extract good video from a challenging environment, no one is going to care. Do it for yourself or don't do it at all. I have watched hundreds of hours of airsoft and CQC training video recorded indoors under artificial light, and they all suffer from the same standard, linear, and one-dimensional action camera look. No one has a sense of style, and style is the reason why the video on the GoPro YouTube channel looks so spectacular.
And finally, this happens a lot, but people focus on the technical details of photography more than the art. Certainly, the technical details are a lot easier to teach. And those of us who are sort of left-brained, as they say, will be drawn to those technical details. They can be fun. And I do really enjoy discussing the technical aspects of it, but all you need to do is to look at the top Instagram photographers, and you'll see that their pictures aren't technically superior, but they're popular. Why? Because the most important thing in a photograph is the subject matter. After that, it comes down to things like the lighting and the composition, the mood and the storytelling. All these things are vastly, vastly more important than the megapixels or the sharpness. None of that matters that much. A picture can have bad color, it can be a little bit blurry, but if you capture a great moment with it, that's what really counts.
If you've been following the film side of YouTube for a while, you've probably heard the phrase "every frame a painting." If not, in essence this phrase could be seen to mean that whenever you pause a movie, that paused frame should be visually impressive enough to be hung up on a wall as a painting. Obviously, in reality the phrase is exaggeration and unreal. Not every frame of a movie ever is or should be worthy of being a painting, because of basic filmmaking things like motion blur. But still, on a more of a shot level, it is an interesting topic. How can a movie actually make it so that many, if not all, of its shots are visually impressive enough to be paintings? And what better way to study this topic further than with 2015's Macbeth? If you want to make your shot look like a painting, then build it out of color. It doesn't have to be colorful, but it should have a color, in form of light, or character, or nature, or object, or whatever. And in order to keep the shot from becoming unpleasant to the eye, make sure to contrast that color against another. If the sky is pale, then maybe wrap your character in black. If the inside of a house is candlelit yellow, then maybe mix in blue light of nature. If the night is dark, then maybe light it up with flames. Anything to keep the frame refreshingly colored. The third aesthetic factor you can notice about 300 is in the colors. I've talked about using color in a more technical sense before, but here the topic is more about the overall appearance, meaning the thing that gives the world of this film such a stylistic look is the strong, exaggerated way it uses light and color. But before you run off to crank your film's vibrancy all the way up, there's a couple things to keep in mind. Firstly, this movie might get away with more because of the source material. Secondly, and more importantly, the exaggerated colors here aren't used just for the sake of using them, but because they also have a narrative and or thematic reason to be there. The third and final core factor that makes Macbeth the visual masterpiece that it is the way it utilizes foreground and background. Even though Macbeth isn't directed by a well-known Hollywood superstar, it still easily stands up to the work of masters like Fincher. There are scenes in Macbeth where the background, for example, is used just to make the foreground look cooler, like there are in every movie. But in addition to that, there are also multiple shots where the background is used to boost the emotional impact that the foreground is meant to evoke, like this one. Again, the main driving force of the shot is the foreground. Well, technically I guess it's a middle ground, but let's just keep it simple. The purpose of the foreground is for Macbeth to evoke the emotion of hopelessness and misery because of the tragic nature of this chaotic battle he's in. You could argue that Macbeth is just distracted by the witches, but for me, this whole sequence above all else revolves around the tragedy of fellow men killing each other. And because Michael Fassbender does do a great job here, it would be a good shot. But how do you make it an amazing shot? By actually simultaneously showing the chaos and the death happening in the background. This choice might seem obvious now, but I don't think that's true. A much more common and safer way would have been to, for example, first shoot a close-up of Macbeth looking at the chaos and only then actually cutting to the chaos. But because those two shots are combined into one by making proper use of foreground and background, a good shot is now an amazing shot.
To give you an idea of what is meant by style through art over technology and color, have a look at what I've done to enhance these videos recorded on GoPro cameras posted on YouTube.
California. I'm gaming with Jet, aka the Desert Fox, and I'm using my G&G SIG SG552, which I honestly can't get enough of. It's a really fun little carbine. And this field, we're about to play a game called the dating game where everybody gathers around the center of the map.
Before I added a sense of style, the video looked linear, one-dimensional action camera-y blah, old and tired. You concentrated only on the foreground and could see nothing of the background. There was zero depth. After I added a sense of style, there are colors and shadows in the background. It looks three-dimensional and interesting. I'm not saying you have to color this way. This is just my way. You have to find your own way.
They blow a whistle, everybody pretty much scatters, and then when the music starts, it's a free-for-all. Now, when you shoot somebody, they have to go down on...
I witnessed my tracer hit someone in the stomach and he kept playing. Be some good blooper footage though.
That's what I feel right now. I've got light and it makes me see my BBs. Like, I know I hit you.
Yeah, you can tell, right?
I see them hit you and fall down.
Come on, 2 quick whistles. Am I good to hit snake?
Oh, let me check. Straight back, straight back.
Straight back. Suppress. I'm gonna get a snake. Ready?
Yeah, go.
Good job.
Good job, man. Don't do that. Not right now. There's way too many people. Go, 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 go! Go, knife man! Run, knife man! Run! Run like you've never run before. Keep answering. Go, 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 go! Go, go, go! I got you covered. Go, go, go! Go! Masada, go, go! Run, run, run! Joseph! I need to try this. This will not work very well, but we're going to try it anyway. Oh god. Okay, okay, come on. Hello. Where the bad people is at? Do you know where the bad people are at? Oh yeah? Alright. Oh god. Oh, it's just getting low.
Now it's time to take everything into account to come up with the GoPro camera settings I use to create indoor video under fluorescent light in conjunction with style, color, and foreground and background. Not quite a painting because of motion blur, however I do like the glowing lights in the middle ground contrasted with the black silhouettes of the players in the background. This is what I'm looking for, these longer distances, enhancing colorful objects, graffiti or lights in the background to draw your eye through the airsoft gun in the foreground.
Sorry. Funny. That was funny as fuck.
Now, when I'm working with the camera on my airsoft gun, I have very different camera settings. Notably, the white balance is set to native, the ISO limit is set to 800, the sharpness is set to low, the EV comp is set to -1.5. With these camera settings, I'm able to create a softer look from the helmet camera, as the distances from the airsoft gun to the ceiling is smaller, meaning I don't have to worry about video noise as much. This video illustrates the differences between raw and edited video, the process that I go through to take the technically inferior GoPro camera video footage and make it into something I can use visually to continue the story of the Alley's players. Typically, when I create a video for the Alley's YouTube channel, I don't just run the video like this. I use some fast-paced music and enhance the highlights of the events I attend, cutting out all the dull portions and those portions of the video where there's heavy noise. Because even after post-production editing, some portions of the footage have too much noise to use visually. With an action camera moving constantly within an indoor environment of variable lighting, fluorescent and other light bulbs all mixed together with well-lit and darkened areas, if we can't do anything about the technically inferior camera, we can at least get the camera to give us enough relevant data to create a sense of style in post-production.